two emigrations. When the Quraysh started persecuting Muslims, it became difficult for Muslims to live in Mecca. Then Muhammad advised some of his followers to emigrate to Abyssinia, because Muhammad said the Christian king of Abyssinia is a just ruler, and Muslim can expect to find refuge in that kingdom. And so in 615, a number of Muslims went to Abyssinia, and the king of Abyssinia actually received Muslims with great honor. And when the Quraysh tried to extradite those Muslims and sent their emissaries to the king had those Quraysh representatives argue with the Muslim representatives. And when he heard the Muslim viewpoint, he said, "No, I'm not going to let these people go and give them to you, because what they are saying is very, very close to what I believe." He was a Christian. And he said, "This is something that I will not do." So he refused the request. And the Quraysh came back very frustrated. In 622, took place what's known as the emigration to Madinah. Madinah is about 250 miles north of the city of Mecca. And that's where Muslims went because the place, Mecca, had become too hot for them to survive in. A question that arises is, what should we call this? Was it a flight on the part of Muhammad, or was it a planned move? Well, considering, and we'll talk about that in the second lecture on Muhammad, Medinan life, that Muhammad was accepted warmly in the city of Medina and was made the unanimous leader of all of Medina. Bless you. It's very hard to say that Muhammad ran from Mecca as a fugitive. No one says to fugitives, "We'll make you our president. We'll make you our chief executive." That hardly ever happens. See, they may give you asylum, say, "All right, you can live your life over here, don't cause any trouble." But the people of Medina accepted Muhammad as their main leader. Even that fact by itself indicates that this was not a flight. But there were negative and positive aspects to this. The negative aspect was that, as I said, things were becoming difficult for Muslims to continue at that time. But on the other side, the city of Medina was racked by a civil strife. And there were two large tribes of Medina which had been locked in struggle against each other for a long time. And a lot of bloodshed had occurred, and the society had broken down practically. And the people of Medina were looking for someone who could provide leadership to them in that situation. So for 2 years consecutively, representatives of the Medinan people met Muhammad secretly at the time of the pilgrimage at the Kaaba. And they reached a deal with him that Muhammad would come to Medina and they would then accept him as the leader, and they would live their life under him as the guide and mentor. And that is what happened. It took 2 years then for the dealing to finalize, and when the opportunity presented itself, Muhammad then moved to Medina. So you have this collocation of two sorts of events or happenings, negative and positive. It was hardly a flight. At that time, it was no longer feasible for Muslims to continue in the city of Mecca, and they needed an independent base for themselves. But the idea always was, we'll use that base and then we'll come back. So it was a retreat, just as Muhammad went to the Mount Hira and then came back to Mecca. Likewise, he went to Medina and then he came back to Mecca. So it was a retreat, withdrawal, but a strategic one. That is how it needs to be looked at. And when Muhammad went there, delegations from various neighboring tribes of Medina came, and they accepted Islam. And from a persecuted minority in Mecca, Muslims became a dominant majority in Medina.